Welcome to our panel today here in Perugia. We will speak about press freedom situation in Southeast Central Europe. SEEMO is the organization that I'm representing, is since years participating in this great festival, and I'm glad that we are again this year here in Perugia. Our speakers in the panel are journalists with long years of experience. I will start to present them very short with a lady coming from Ukraine. It's Anna Babinets, first person from your left side. She's a young but very experienced journalist. She was also active in the famous Panama Papers last year in the investigations, but she's doing also different other investigations as journalist in Ukraine. And she did, I would say, her first bigger international story during the famous changes that happened in Ukraine after that with the famous YanukovychLeaks. The second person next to Anna is Zrinka Vrabec Mojzes, coming from Croatia. She is editor in the weekly Nacional from Zagreb. I would say the leading weekly in Croatia. Critical, independent. And also she was one of the people who started the first, I would say one of the first independent media in the region of former Yugoslavia. It was the Radio 010 from Zagreb, where she worked for years. And she was a short period, of 4 years, it's not so short, advisor of the Croatian president Ivo Josipovic. And after she finished the job of the advisor, because Josipovic lost the elections, she started again to work as journalist. Our colleague coming from Albania, Besar Likmeta, is also now, I would say, a long-year journalist with a lot of experience. He was becoming international well-known when SEEMO also reacted, I think in the year 2008 it was, or when the member of the parliament attacked you, when he wanted to make an interview and then he had a small conflict with the politician in Albania, or the politician became aggressive against him as a journalist. Finally, we have a lady sitting on my right side, on your left side. It's Ms. Barbara Fabro, coming from the Central European Initiative in Trieste, who is a long years partner of SEEMO. And because we are speaking about press freedom, the idea is that she presents very short, because we have just yesterday the call for our Investigate Journalist Award that is also given to journalists in Italy. So I will invite Barbara to present this year call, because I think it could be interesting also for you, your colleagues, to participate in that call. It's since now, I would say, 7 years, 8, 9, 10 years, giving every year by SEEMO. So Barbara, please.
Thank you, Oliver. First of all, I would like to thank the festival organizers for hosting this panel today here and to give us the possibility to focus on press freedom in Southeastern Europe. The CI and SEEMO are quite active in this respect, promoting many activities together. Just a few words about the Central European Initiative, which is a regional organization comprising 18 countries in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. 10 are members of the European Union and 8 are not members. And our main mission is to promote a cooperation among our countries and to bring non-EU countries closer to the European Union. And we are doing that at the political level, but also at the project level. So we are promoting many activities and projects in our area in many fields, and media is one of these areas. Together with SEEMO, we have a long-standing partnership. We are promoting the Southeast Europe Media Forum, which is an event held every year in a different country. Last year we were in Serbia, Belgrade. This time we will be in Sofia, in Bulgaria. But together we are promoting an activity supporting, in particular, investigative journalism. This is the SEEMO Award for Outstanding Merits in Investigative Journalism. We have just launched the call 2017. It is open to all 18 countries of the Central European Initiative. We have two categories, professional journalists and young professional journalists, because we want to support also the young generation of journalists. And it is really meant to support investigative reporting, to give visibility to the work that investigative journalists are doing in their countries with many difficulties, very often under pressure, under risky conditions. So it's really an important activity for us. And here we have some of the journalists who participated in this activity. The call was launched, as I said, so I invite you to spread the information. It is open also to Italian journalists, but usually we don't get so many applications from Italy, so I invite really all of you to check the call for application on our websites. So now I really want to give floor to our journalists here. They will tell us their experiences in their countries, and they talk about their work there. So thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. And of course, the award has also a financial part, so the winner receives also some money. So it's a positive way support for the journalists to work. Now we are continuing with the real dangerous life of journalists in Southeast Europe. Speaking about dangerous life of journalists, we are speaking about a region where journalists are still attacked physically. We have cases of journalists and cases of journalists who have been killed, and where still it's not known who ordered this killing or who did the killing of the journalists. For example, only in Serbia we have 3 cases of journalists who have been killed. We are speaking about the area where journalists receive different form of threats by phone, email, family members. It's very dangerous to work as a journalist. So many journalists we have in the region, after our latest evidence, at least what we could get the information, because it's hard, because this is also connected to police sources and it's not public. But what journalists informed us in the SEEMO region, we have in this moment 12 journalists who are living with police protection. Police protection means that you're 24 hours living with police, who is helping that you survive, that you stay alive. But another way, it makes your work as a journalist hard, or very hard, because you have not the freedom of the movement, and always a police officer is going close to you. What means, especially if you're doing good investigation or some other job, you're not so free to move. So this police protection helps journalists on one side to stay alive, but on the other side makes the work of the journalist very hard. And some journalists really say, I don't want the protection, because they are afraid that they will not have easy contact to the sources of information, because if a journalist have to meet someone and there's a police officer close to him, normally many people will not be glad to meet this journalist. So that's the reality. That's the reality in Southeast Europe. And this reality, we cannot say there is a difference between those countries who are part of EU and not part of EU. Of course, we have 2 countries in the SEEMO region where we have especially big problems, like Turkey or Belarus. But independent from these 2 countries, and I would say, because we have our guests here from Ukraine, from Croatia, and from Albania, we should concentrate more on those countries that are closer to Italy. And okay, Ukraine is not so close, but it's a very interesting country, and that's happening so a lot. So I would say we should try to concentrate on these countries. But of course, if you have a question, also some other countries, I'm sure that our friends and colleagues will be ready to help you with some information, because all of our colleagues are very much connected in the region. That's a very strong cross-border cooperation between journalists. So I'm sure that every one of them is good informed also about situation in some other countries. Speaking about press freedom and the hard work of journalists, we will start with one country that is close to Italy, that's an EU member, and as you know, Italy is also a long EU member, and still journalists have also here in Italy a lot of problems. But we are speaking about a young EU country, and as a young EU country, I will say there are really a lot of problems for journalists, and not only that there are a lot of problems, but many journalists are not only afraid to work, but especially speaking about young generation, we have a fact that many people don't like to be for years journalists. They start to be a journalist for several years, and then when they understand that there's not big money, that it is too dangerous, these young journalists are starting to go to the business, to the PR, to the marketing, and leaving the journalist job. But we have one lady who is really a long year experienced journalist. She's young, but she has big experience, Zrinka. And as I said, Croatia is an EU country. How is it to be a journalist of the security, safety, reporting?
I'll tell you, but I first have to practice my Italian. Cari colleghi italiani, voglio saluto tutti. Io sono da Croazia e lavoro per la settimanale politico che si chiama Nacional. E anche io lavoro per la televisione regionale TVNet. Ho lavorato per la Radio 101 per 26 anni. E poi per 5 anni ho lavorato in ufficio del presidente Vujovic. Now I'll go to English.
Okay, thanks. This was
Voglio parlare in italiano, ma non parlo bene.
Sì, grazie. Just a small remark, this was not the European Song Contest or Eurovision Song Contest where usually they try to speak in the local language.
No.
And I think Zrinka was not so bad in Italian, so congratulations. But
okay, I suppose that I made some mistakes, but I was trying. And I'll work on it, I promise. So I've been working for different independent media all my life, ever since 1984, much before than most of you were born, probably. I started to work as a student on then First Independent Radio 101 and spent there 26 years of my life. And since 2015, I'm back to journalism, working as journalist and political columnist in Nacional Political Weekly. And also, I have my TV show on regional TV, TVNet. Actually, I told you all that because I started so long ago, in 1984. My generation really dreamt that we were able, as a media, to change society and to work on democratization of Croatia, bringing European spirit to Croatian audience. And well, in the end, when we managed to do it, I think that the whole generation is so disappointed. What I would like to say that from 2000, when we founded SEEMO in Zagreb as Southeast European media organization, I think that this is the process which, this democratization process of Croatia started well. And it went together with the integration process of Croatia into the European Union, harmonizing our standards with European standards. But economic crisis, which started in 2008 and ended last year, I have to say that this recession struck Croatia seriously, and it destroyed the independent media scene, but also most of the mainstream media, where thousands of journalists lost their jobs. And I would like to stress that this economic threat, is probably equal to all the other threats that the profession is facing. To be honest, the entire generation, which was in their ages working hardly on democratization of Croatian society and political system, was swept away, replaced by younger, cheaper, ignorant, and willing to obey so-called journalists. I don't wish to insult any one of you, because I believe that there are still young people who really want to work hard trying to find truth. But from the moment we became members of the European Union and Croatia became a member on the 1st of July 2013, we lost monitoring. So there was no monitoring of those democratization processes or anything that was happening with the media. Status of journalism, media freedom became worse. Hate speech, threatenings were growing and becoming worse. And I was always claiming that actually Croatia was going backwards when it comes to human rights, media freedom, position of minorities, freedom of speech, revision of history, tolerating fascization of society. And this was proved finally by the latest very critical reports by Amnesty International and State Department, which were very, very critical, but at the same time almost completely ignored by the state officials. Symbolically, the most tragic event dealing with journalism, actually cruel assassination of a journalist, happened in 2008, when the late founder and the owner of the papers I work for, Ivo Pukanic, was brutally killed, together with his colleague who was in charge for advertising, Nikola Franjic. There is a book about this assassination. This guy was killed, the car exploded, and actually what he was doing, he was investigating tobacco mafia in Montenegro, Croatia, and Serbia, testifying against those guys here in Italy. Those who committed crime were prosecuted and sent to jail, but those who ordered this murders, because there were two of them, were actually never revealed. Ever since then, there were a number of threats and attacks on journalists. According to the police, which in parliamentary session, which was organized by the end of last year, presented some data from 2010 to today. There were 78 attacks on journalists who are directly or are indirectly related to the performance of their work, of which it was established 50 criminal offenses and 10 other offenses. 5 works are still in the process of determining, while the 13 works have not found elements of criminal acts. The session held in National Parliament was convened because of the escalation of hate speech and violence against journalists, and there were representatives of professional organization of journalists, police, and other institutions. The police data show that the escalation of attacks began in 2014, which means a year after we joined the European Union, when the number of attacks had doubled, and culminated in 2015, when the number tripled. The number of attacks this year, according to it was last year in 2016, to previously known data, returned to the level from 2014. Of the 50 criminal offenses, 46 were threats, 2 serious bodily injuries, 1 grand larceny, and attempted violent behavior. Perpetrators in 35 cases were known or discovered, which, according to the interim chief of police, were the good results. But most of those who committed real crimes against journalists, like in case of my colleague Dusan Miljuš, who was working for the daily Jutarnji List and who was beaten almost to death 5 years ago, were never brought to the face of justice. In the meantime, there was a serious attempt of endangering life of the president of Croatian Journalists Association, Besar Likmeta, when the tires of his car, somebody loosened the screw on the wheels of his car, and it was a few months ago. There is another example of very famous columnist, Ante Tomic, from Jutarnji List, who is also very critical towards those in power, who was threatened, beaten, and attacked in a way that some lunatic had thrown, how can I say that? Okay, so he was thrown garbage on his head. Nowadays, opposition, meaning Social Democrats, who were once in position, is very critical now, and they believe that violence against journalists and violence in general can be stopped only by efficient work of state institutions. They now wonder if something happened after those investigations, and they claim that attackers can be discouraged only if they are prosecuted. They also claim that the radicalization of hate speech was encouraged by policy, in that public discourse infused vulgar language. When in parliament or other institutions go to defamation, insults, then such speech sends a bad message to the public. This is what they say. This is some true in it, because reactions from the president and even from the prime minister when it comes to the crimes against journalists can be understood in a way: you asked for it, so behave. The prime minister, current Prime Minister, who was MP in the European Parliament and is diplomat by profession, also warns journalists that, first of all, they should be responsible for what they write and report. I think that we all agree on it, but people who are beaten or those who were and are threatened did not publish lies. On the contrary. And to be honest, since Nacional Weekly, the papers I'm working for, by investigation about corruption in oil industry and clash of interest of the vice president of previous government, who was also president of the strongest right central party in power, made the whole government resign last year. So this proves that media are still strong. We made them resign 6 months ago. Now we have a new government, which is supposed to belong to the Christian Democratic Center, with a prime minister who, as I said, was MP in the European Parliament. We got rid of radical right Minister of Culture, and Ministry of Culture is responsible for the media, who canceled financing of non-profit media and NGOs. He was the one who claimed that anti-fascism was platitude and that NGOs were actually working against the state. But the problem is that whoever is in power in Croatia still controls so-called public television, which is not public, but state television. They use services from big media moguls and corporations and make political and financial deals with them. Social Democrats, unfortunately, did the same. So there is no difference between parties in power. They behave differently only when they're in opposition, then they need independent media. Independent media are punished in a way that their layouts do not get any money from advertising, and they hardly survive on the market. Relation between influence of the papers, for example, the papers I work for, who are very influential, and the financial power is really tragic because we have no financial power. I'll end. And it's hard to keep experienced professionals working for very low wages just because they love the truth. Actually, when talking about threats toward journalism as a profession, I would say that today in Croatia, this economic is the greatest. Thank you very much. Sorry for abusing my time.
Thanks a lot, Zrinka. And I would just add that how the situation has influence of journalists. We have an example for journalist who was also attacked, I think, 2 years or 3 years ago, Zrinka Vrabec, and he decided after all to leave the country. He lives now, I think, in Switzerland because he could not more live normal in Croatia with his family, and he said, like, I'm leaving the country, I want to start to live somewhere where I can live normal. Of course, speaking about Croatia, we have in the neighborhood of Croatia another country like Hungary, where we have a lot of press freedom problems, but we can say in Hungary it's one thing. We have a system that makes the work of journalists hard, very hard. In Croatia, it's a little different because we have many individuals who make the work of journalists hard, who are attacking physically journalists, who are threatening journalists. So it's not just the system, it's also this individual. And that makes really more harder because you don't know who is your enemy or by whom you will be attacked. And by speaking by whom you will be attacked, I think it's a good point now to go to Besar because he was physically attacked by a politician, by a member of parliament in Albania. And I think it would be interesting for the audience just you explain what happened this 10 years ago to you. It's a long year period, but you are an example how dangerous it is to be a journalist in Albania. And then maybe you can speak about the general press freedom situation today in Albania, please.
Thank you, Oliver. I guess if I had a dime every time I have to tell the story, I would be very, very rich right now, but I guess nobody gave me those money. Well, basically 10 years ago, I was interviewing this former bodyguard and turned politician about his supposed law degree in a Tirana hotel, at the Sheraton Hotel, and just we had done a story basically which was wider and looked at how a lot of people with that's drug trafficking records or were trying to get into politics, and how they were buying fake degrees in the open market. So there was a report from the Ministry of Education when they found out that these guys basically never finished or never went to school. So after we gathered our facts, we did what every normal journalist does: is give the party the right to respond, and this is when the physical attack happened, and then the story goes on. The politician was investigated, but he was never charged because, unfortunately, there were no witnesses to testify on my behalf, either those who were very close to the attack. Another guy who was present at the attack was another MP who now is actually Deputy Minister of Justice. The politician is still an MP. So this is how normally physical attacks that happen against journalists in the Balkans are resolved. I mean, the authorities don't act, and then the stories get repeated. So in the last 10 years since I was attacked, there were other journalists who were attacked, and the one was just a few weeks ago. But it's not the only form of attack. I mean, we think as physical attacks as being at least the most hurtful, and definitely that concerns a lot. It's a lot on our minds in terms of security whenever we report a story. But there are other attacks that are happening, which politicians are choosing as their favorite form, and this is happening because they don't want the, let's say, the international media attention that you get from physical attacks. And they're moving anyway from trying to bribe other media to attack you or discredit you as a journalist, or as let's say as an editor, or the media outlet that you work for, or which is the most, I think lately we have seen in the last 2 years, is this being involved in some international conspiracy, the so-called Soros conspiracy being the most famous one because a lot of independent media in the Balkans are financed by these philanthropic or open society organizations. And this has become the tune of their favorite form of, let's say, delegitimizing the media, from Macedonia to Hungary. At some point in time, especially after Trump got elected, and this goes very well with right-wing conspiracy theories in the US. Every independent journalist, every independent voice is supposed to be out of this like world domination conspiracy, which is out trying to undermine the state, which is paid from some dark interest, which controls every central bank around. So there is this nice story played day after day after day to the ears of the local public, which let's admit it. I mean, it's not used to judging facts very thoughtfully, and this is not only happens in Albania, but this happens in Macedonia, this happens in Serbia, this happens across the region. And now, as we know, in terms of conspiracy theories, this happens a lot also in democratic countries. So it's a problem that we have as journalists, because we not only have to produce facts, we have to challenge powerful politicians with our facts, hopefully hold them accountable, but we have to all the time respond or figure a way to deal with the attacks coming with the other media outlets that they control. In a country like Albania, we used to think that we had opposition and pro-government media, which they change side or let's say, reform all the time the government changes. But unfortunately, the truth is that there is like few independent journalists, and the rest of the media is there just to PR whoever is in power. Mm-hmm. There is good journalists, but there is also a lot of bad journalists, and let's just admit it. I mean, it's very easy to be a bad journalist. Not only in the Balkans, I'm sure it's the same thing in Italy. A bad journalist basically has his life, I mean, he has financial security, he just holds the microphone and let the guy say whatever he wants, it's true or not. He will get, the promotion, he will get assisted by those in power, he will get, cushioned because they're very clannish, this group of journalists and politicians who stick together and act as propaganda tools basically for those in power. And who is in power in the Balkans? In the Balkans, the people who are in power are drug traffickers, are oligarchs, and politicians. The problem we have is that it's very hard to make the difference now from one and each other. I mean, 10 years ago, you could say, oh, yeah, this is the oligarch, this is the politician, and that's the drug trafficker. But in the last 10 years, we have the drug trafficker becoming politician, the oligarch becoming a media owner, or the politician owning the media themselves. So it's all very, very, very confusing of what we have to deal with. But in this kind of environment, it's very important that the journalist sticks to his basic principles, which is highest integrity. This is the only thing that can defend you. And the thing I tell, as I work as an editor for the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, with most journalists I worked with, the thing I preach them is that the biggest defense that you ever had against somebody who wants to attack you, being that physically or morally or in any other form, it's basically your integrity. The more independent you are, the more unstained you are, the more difficult it is for them to attack you, because they don't have nothing against you. I mean, most of the time in Albania when we publish investigation, I have colleagues of mine coming in and asking, okay, did you get a phone call or were you threatened? And I'm like, no. And they're surprised. It's like, nobody calls. I mean, they just try to ignore you, and they will use their propaganda tools basically to create an alternative reality. This doesn't happen all the time. I mean, there is cases when normally you're threatened with lawsuits. We had a case last year when, actually in 2015, when Albania had local elections, and we knew that and there was a lot of concerns of people with a criminal background, and not a criminal background in Albania, but a criminal background in the EU, in Italy, running in the elections. And then we were investigating the story, and basically we found out that at least 3 of the mayor candidates, 1 from the opposition and 2 from the ruling party, had a criminal background in Italy, Switzerland, and other countries, and meaning being drug traffickers of the worst kind. When we published the evidence, basically what we were threatened with was a lawsuit for 100,000 euros. I mean, the Prime Minister never followed through with it. He would attack us on TV of being like trashy media outlet. His favorite, cliche spell on it was that, like, we're not exactly the Vatican, those beer reporters or other things like that. But what it created in terms of this single story about the criminal background of these people is that it pushed the Albanian Parliament actually to pass a law on the integrity of public figures, because a lot of pressure came from the EU. We're still trying to get in, so we're still under monitoring. And a lot of pressure came from the EU, and a lot of pressure came from the US. So there was the local political parties discrepancy passed this law that whoever had a criminal background should declare it. If they lied on their form, they'll be out. Funny enough, the guys that we reported on had a criminal background, and after these forms were filled, after they lied again, and after they were found out lying, they were exposed and they were run out of office. One of the mayors now is basically under investigation. He was fired. We're going to have elections maybe in 3 weeks in that small municipality. Other people had to expose their criminal background. And this is something what shouldn't have been achieved without the work of journalists. Did we do that? Okay, we're not the greatest media outlet in the country. Our possibilities are not always the greatest financially because we're an independent non-profit media outlet. But we did that with working with colleagues and journalists. For example, some of the reporting was done by an Italian journalist, which I'm very proud to have worked with, Fausto Bellislavo, which is a very good journalist working not only in Italy, but reporting from many war-torn countries. We cooperated with other reporters across the region. We had to dig information in places which is difficult to do, like Switzerland, for example, because they have a lot of data protection. So the system that these people thought that was going to keep them safe in terms of, like, data protection in Europe and not being exposed as people with a criminal background didn't work in their behalf. We've done stories that range from, jihadist networks in the region, from Kosovo to Albania, sending people to fight in Syria, high-level corruption cases, and you always get the question from people, why do you do it? Normally, not always our stories get the reaction that they've got in this case of the mayors. Normally, the politician will frown on it. They will act like nothing happened. When there is prosecutions being launched, but unfortunately, the prosecution never amount to too much in a sense. And a lot of people said that. I had one journalist colleague coming to me like a week ago. It's just like, what are you achieving? You're just making people depressed. I mean, like, shouldn't you be looking for solutions or anything? I'm like, well, yeah, but I mean, this is not my job exactly. I mean, my job is to expose facts and have the public judge on them. I don't expect for journalists to mold the public's perception of reality. I expect the journalist to, expose whatever is going on out there, do his work properly, and the public should respond. Does this always work? Not always. I mean, you need a lot of media literacy. Should be many other things in place for change to happen. But, I mean, shouldn't journalists transform themselves into something else, or should the rest of the public or educators move on and help this like current enterprise in order to produce change, especially in countries where they have a hard time with organized crime, corruption, and everything else. So the good news beyond the bad news that you receive a lot of attacks and things like that is that even in countries like Albania, Kosovo, Macedonia, in the region, there is a lot of brave journalists who are actually putting up a fight against the people in power. I mean, I'm sure the most unpopular person to, I don't know, the Serbian newly elected president are journalists, which his media attacks let's say the pro-government media attacks all day long and tries to make him look like foreign spies. I mean, like working for the US or working for the EU. Yeah, there is such thing as a EU spy in the Balkans, if you would believe it. So whenever you see these stories about attacks, don't just look and feel sorry for us. Just read the story itself when it was based and think that actually that was done for a reason. These are people who care about their own societies, and these are people who actually are facing up to powerful forces, as I said, oligarchs, criminals, and politicians, which are both or the same. So,
thanks a lot, Professor. And just a small note before we are continuing with Ukraine. This is one phenomenon we have in this region is, you know what hate speech is. The other phenomenon is this calling hate silence. What means everyone is ignoring the journalists. It means you try as journalists to get information, but it's not possible because you're ignored. You're ignored by every politician and so on. The parties are ignoring you. They don't give you this information. And this is a special, also I will say, specific problem we have very often in the region. Speaking about Anna in Ukraine, everyone of you knows also Ukraine because of the sad story of one part of the country with the conflict, real war that is happening in part of the country. But I think we should concentrate now not in this, say, east area of Ukraine, but really on that part, Kiev and other parts more to the west of Ukraine, where journalists have the freedom of movement, have the freedom of work, but still there are a lot of problems. Just last year, there was a journalist who was killed in a car bomb. So I would say, Anna, if you can give a small presentation of the situation in Ukraine, especially also from your side as a very good young investigative journalist, maybe to present also the problems you have in the daily work. Please.
Thanks, Oliver. I was here 3 years ago in this room, and it was time after our president Viktor Yanukovych ran away from country. And when Yanukovych was president, journalists had one problem, because all our work, all our investigations were ignored, absolutely. We could did everything, but it was ignored. And 3 years ago, when I spoke here, it was about situation in Ukraine, war conflict just started. But I was more optimistic about future of Ukraine, because it looked like this pro-Russian leader Yanukovych, he and a lot of top officials run away from country, and we can start like new page of Ukrainian story. And when I was here, we didn't have president. In couple weeks, we voted new president Petro Poroshenko. I think that you know him. And
the chocolate producer with
yeah.
Nice chocolate.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of the big problem for him. 3 years ago, it looked like all process in Ukraine will be more democratic. And now I can say that it is, but we have highest level of problem and highest level of fighting between journalists and authority. Because now Yanukovych was president, he was part of Donetsk mafia. It's Donetsk, it's east of region, and he was just guy from mafia. But now we have president who is businessman. He has pretty big business. It's chocolate business, and the most important for us that he is owner of big
national channel. So he knows how to work in media market. Our previous president, he just ignored us and we could do everything. Now we have problem because when we start to work against president or his team or some top officials, every time it's very big attack. I just will say about last year, about examples from last year. I think that everybody here knows about Panama Papers scandal, and unfortunately, Ukrainian president was one of people who appeared there as owner of BVI offshore company. And the biggest problem was that he created this company when he was a president of Ukraine. It's forbidden in Ukraine. I think like in every civil countries. So when I started to work with Panama Papers, it was pretty long work for 8 months. And when we found a name of our president there, we realized that when he wanted to be a president, he promised that I will sell this chocolate, Roshan, it names Roshan, this chocolate fabric. Because it's big business, it's some conflict of interest, that I will not be owner, it's very bad, so when I will be elected, I will sell it. And sometimes after that, he announced that some Switzerland trust manages his business. But as we found in Panama Papers database, it was not true. He just created like couple offshore companies, some companies in Holland, some companies in Netherlands, some companies in Cyprus, and the final company was in British Virgin Islands. And we realized that he created, his lawyers created this scheme for tax avoiding. And he didn't want to sell his company, he just wanted to hide it in offshore jurisdiction where it's almost impossible to figure out who is owner, who is beneficial owner. But when we published it, it was 1 year ago, and it was like big scandal for all world that our president is created offshore in the time when we had very high battles in the east of Ukraine. He created his offshore companies, and when we published it, in last day, it was 3 journalists, me, Vlad Lavrov, and Dmitro Gnap. We published a couple pieces of print, and we filmed a short documentary about this case. And we were attacked by some by some media, some pro-president media, some our colleagues, and some people who protect president. And it was company for 2 months. 2 months every day. Some people told us that you work for Russia, you work for Kremlin because you want to destroy our country. It's not big problems that president created business company. What he should do, he has business, he want to, it's like, it was like absolutely alternative world, because we were absolutely sure that it's unnormal, it's impossible to create business, to create offshore company and avoid taxes in country which has economical crisis because of war. And a lot of people in Ukraine who protected president, they started to tell us, you are wrong, you are against our country. And when we continued this story, we published some pieces, like some update. And when we talked to some lawyers in Ukraine, we recorded them, and they explained us, really, it's company for tax evading. We published this story, and during a couple days, everybody from this expert denied his own words, that journalists manipulated, journalists just, I didn't mean this thing. One of experts told us that he was called to administration of president, and some people there showed him some piece of paper what exactly he should fix on his comments. And he didn't want to do it, but mostly people who talked to us, who explained us how this, because it's pretty complicated things. I mean, creating offshore companies, I never did it. So we should ask some people who can explain us how it works, for what this jurisdiction, for what Cyprus, for what BVI, or another jurisdiction. And people explained us, and after that they were attacked by people from administration of president, and they denied that, no, it was not me, it was just something they created, but it was recorded to video. How? And it was war between us and president for 2 or 3 months. For example, they took something from our publication, for example, that we used some Cyprus lawyer for explaining some details about Cyprus, and they found that she has Russian background. She lived 30 years ago in Moscow, and they found something in her Facebook that she is pro-Russian, and this journalist is pro-Russian too. And it was pretty hard, because we realized that we just did our work, and we were part of this company, and we should go to every TV show and protect our work. It's still, but after that, our president he re-registered his company, and now it looks like Switzerland Trust manage his business. But anyway, he's still owner of it, and we are continuing work on this story. And one more thing which happened last year, it's more terrible. Our colleague, it's Pavlo Sheremet, he was killed. It was 9 months ago. He was killed in the downtown of Kiev. He just drove to his work, and his car was exploded. He was journalist with Belarusian background. He started his career in Belarus. He worked several years in Russia, but last 5 years he worked in Ukraine. He was our friend, he was our colleague, and we know that a lot of violation in Ukraine because of this war conflict on the east, and it's like a lot of people understand that war and a lot of murders there, but it was shock for everybody, because it was first time one journalist was killed in the downtown of Kiev. In 1 hour after that, my colleague Dmitry Gnab, he called me and told me, "What are you doing home? Just come here." And we started work on this, because at that moment, even in 1 hour after murder, we realized that our police will never solve this murder. And we met there with 2 more colleagues, and we started our own independent investigation. We started to collect all CCTV cameras footage around this area where this car was exploded. We found people who, in the CCTV cameras, we found people who put this bomb to his car. It was at night before murder. It was man and woman. We have this footage. And it's 8 months. Murder is not solved. And we are almost finished our documentary investigation, and we have some results. We will publish it in I think in 2 weeks. It will be during April. We will publish it. It was big work, because a lot of international people helped us with from United States, from Romania. I mean, this work in process. And people from Bellingcat, I think you know this organization, they helped us with good quality of license plates on cars, or with better quality of pictures we got from the CCTV cameras, because it was at night. And we will publish this. Now we are trying to ask officials, police and general prosecutors how is going investigation. And because in first hours after murder, our president, everybody in Ukraine told that it's very important to solve this murder. All policemen, everybody will work on it. Now we have no results. But we will publish it, and we hope that it will push our police and investigators who can not only ask, we just journalists, we just ask people about the CCTV footage. They can, police can come to them and ask about, not ask, just give us, and that's all. So it's very hard things which is happening in Ukraine, but and we are, I'm happy that we are not ignored by our president, but by top politicians. But now it's more hard because we understand that everybody can be killed, everybody can be attacked by this very good PR people who have pretty good salary, who protect president, his business, his interest. But and because of it, we just should be ready for everything. And that's the way how journalists in Ukraine work.
Thanks a lot, Anna. I don't know if there is some question from the audience. Yes, there's one question. Okay, before we will start with the questions, this, say, conflict with the President Poroshenko, when was it? 2016 or 15?
You mean this Panama Papers?
No, with Poroshenko, what you made the investigation, it was part of the Panama Papers when it was published after that.
1 year ago.
1 year ago,
it
okay.
was April, May, and June.
Okay,
so.
that's the moment. Okay, that's now clear why a lady who I know who is close to Poroshenko stopped to communicate with me, because she probably learned that you got once our awards 2014. So then she decided not more to communicate with me because I had a good communication with her. And then once, about 1 year ago, she stopped to contact and to speak with me. So it was probably you are responsible for that. But speaking about the award, just to say that Besar got the award 2009. And now going to the questions, and then we can continue with you. Please.
Milica Pešić, Media Diversity Institute, London. I have two questions, one for Zrinka, one for Oliver. Zrinka, you said there is no more monitoring by the EU since Croatia became a member. Would you advise the European Union, the European Commission, to be careful with other countries in the region before letting them in? Question for Oliver. Oliver, you are known as a person who actually manages, contrary to many journalist associations in the region, to bring politicians, top politicians, presidents to journalist events, which many people, as we know, see it as controversial. My question to you is, and you write official letters and protest to them, when you are face to face with them, what do they actually tell you? Why they are doing what they are doing? Off the record, tell us what actually they tell you. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I will start because I will be shorter probably. We start with jokes, family stories and things like that. When you make these officials, high-level politicians, presidents, prime ministers and so on, usually when we have this, say, most cases, these are off-the-record meetings. We publish after the meeting some statement and so on with some results, but the results more or less are official things, so you cannot publish some sensation and some special big story. So usually we have a chance during this meeting really to speak open with these politicians, and I'm sometimes surprised how open they are, how open really they speak about things. Sometimes they are very self-critical. And I would say if we would publish sometimes really what they're saying, maybe we could destroy the life of them, because sometimes they are so open and saying like, or maybe that's the result because they feel so secure that they generally speak, yes, I know this is a mistake I made, this is and so on, but they don't see it as a problem for their career, for their, say, political position. And I think that's because they are so strong. And that's a big problem. We have politicians who are really strong, who are coming in this political life with the idea not to help the population, but to stay in power. And that's the only interest the most politicians have, I will say, in this Southeast Central Europe region. So they are so strong and so secure in themselves that I think they can do whatever they want. For us, for example, was a surprise when we met. It was the former Macedonian, now his former prime minister some years ago. We planned, for example, to have, it was an official meeting, 15 minutes it was planned in an agenda to have a meeting. We had, at the end, over 2 hours a meeting with him because he was so ready to speak with us and so on. So I'm sometimes really surprised how the politicians are open. But what is dangerous is this thing, and that is what I'm saying in many of these countries. We have the political pressure of the politicians. On the other side, we have journalists who are not enough strong to fight for the journalists' ideas. So we have very often very strong to say self-censorship, what I'm not so happy. And I'm saying journalists try to be more open because very often journalists in the SEEMO region, they don't have any clear pressure from the state, but they believe they should write positive about this prime minister and politician. Also, no one makes direct pressure on them. And this is a big problem, and the politicians are using this. They're using it. So very often they are not doing anything, these big politicians. They're just sitting in the office and watching how many journalists are ready to make from this politician who's no one, who's really an ordinary person, a god. And we have really a situation that many politicians in the SEEMO region became, after 1 year or 2 years of power, really a god, a person who no one can touch and so on. And I must say journalists are partly also responsible for that. Please.
Well, I would agree, but I don't think that there is any pressure. They just have benefits from obliging the politicians. But yes, what I asked for, and it was not only me, but there was a number of NGOs from Croatia asking for monitoring, not only in the field of human rights and freedom of speech and media, but also in the field of corruption, the way Romania and Bulgaria had, because what we are seeing now, that we are still facing those problems. Unfortunately, we don't have this monitoring, and whoever was asking for it was, at the moment, called a traitor of the country. So, you know, we were accused of not being good Croats and not being patriots at that time. But of course, if you try to look at the wider picture, the problems I was talking about with media freedom are problems that European Union as a whole is facing, not to mention Berlusconi, long time ago when he was controlling half of Italian media, not only his private media imperium, but also, as I know, Rai 1, 2, and 3. So it also happens within the European countries. The problem is that Croatia, with the president, and she is one of she is insisting on that cooperation, is lining with Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Czech Republic, with so-called Visegrad Group countries. And what European Union is facing right now is this disrespect for European values, not only among countries which are not the members, but also within the EU, especially with the new member countries. So this is a problem. What I would like to add is, yes, there is a great division among journalists themselves. So we also have this division in Croatia, and there are two different associations. So one, and they consider themselves as being patriots, and the other, this is Croatian Journalists Association that I'm a member of, and this is the oldest organization. And we have always been seen like not being patriotic enough. And for the president of the other association, which was founded a year ago, there was absolutely no problems. I will cite what she said. She said that recently there was never greater freedom, but no more unverified facts, journalistic sloppiness and spins. So she thinks that actually it's journalists' fault for what was happening. And the other thing, yes, Oliver has his ways. So he was very nice to our most radical Minister of Culture. He met him last year. The guy pressed charges against my weekly. We are going to see him in court. And I asked him, how could you talk to such a person? Because he's really radical. He's almost a fascist. I could probably say it here. He won't press charges, but probably he would. And he said, well, he's a nice guy. We spoke with him. So he has his ways.
You have to see the positive side of every person.
But luckily, we got rid of him. But the damage that this guy made to Croatia 2 years after we became a member of the European Union is huge. And there is a number of journalists who actually still follow his agenda, including those on public television. And this is what happened after we became a member. So this is dangerous. And I would recommend monitoring, not just in Croatia, but in all other countries, even the old member countries, because what we are facing now is the same problem everywhere.
Thanks, Zrinka. Of course, it's a question of EU, how this mechanism can function. And if we have one question, just to mention, you mentioned that your president, Ms. Kitarovic would like to follow the, say, Hungarian-Polish Visegrad Group model. At least she promised me personally when I met her last year that she will not do it and that she will she will not follow this, say, what happens in Hungary.
She's a very nice lady. She charmed you, probably.
Okay, I still believe in her promise, and till we have no proof,
don't trust her.
I'm trusting to everyone in the beginning. So the question, Mr. Sir.
One question for our friend from Albania. You said there is no conspiracy from George Soros, but there is a clear influence of George Soros on the media in Central Europe. Are the links of George Soros with different US agencies are very, very well documented? Is that a help or a threat for free journalism?
To be honest, I'm not a spokesman for George Soros. Let's just make it clear. And I'm not sure about all the links that are documented that you mentioned. I'll be very happy to review them if you had evidence and publish something on it. The fact of the truth is that if there are links or not, it's not important. They're using these conspiracy theories to attack independent journalists who are writing on corruption and organized crime and perpetuating the stories which basically, when you read them, there is no facts. I mean, there is no facts inside, there is only insinuations. And there are people like, let's say, the Hungarian president who just, or prime minister who just closed the university, the former Macedonian prime minister. They are using these attacks or conspiracy theories like George Soros or being like a foreign EU spy or things like that with no facts. The other side is actually contributing facts. But I'm very happy to listen to people who bring facts to the table all the time, and they'll be everyone I meet.
I would just like to add that Soros left the region a long time ago, so he's not investing into media in the region. He moved to the east, and we have not been receiving any kind of help for 10 years or more. So, you know, those accusations actually have...
Thanks. Is there any question more from the audience? If there's... Yes, before you ask the question, very short, about what Zrinka mentioned, it's a problem. It's a problem because it's not more so sexy to invest money to support independent media in this, say, region of East and Southeast and Central Europe. So we have now really a big problem of surviving. We are speaking about a region with not development economics, people who are earning monthly 200, 300 euro. And those people who are critical, who are independent, they don't have, after years and years of fight, more wish to fight for democracy. And because there are no more support from organizations like Soros, the life of them is harder. And speaking about Soros, independent what is the investigation, what Soros is doing and so on, I can say one thing. I spoke with really different media who got money from Soros. And I know the people, so I can speak open. And I can say at least with those with whom I spoke, they say me very clear, they got the money from Soros, but there was never a pressure from Soros or his organizations, you must publish this, you must write this, and so on. So it was, in a way, positive what Soros was doing in the region because he was giving cash money to the media, to NGOs, and they could do the job. If they will not Soros, no one will give this money. So we should say in the history, Soros plays an important role, at least for that survival of democracy, development of democracy in the region, because at least after all information I got and our partners got, there's not any evidence that Soros tried to make any pressure on the media or the NGOs who got the money that they should change the policy, do a special reporting about something and so on. So it means he just gave the money. And in that way, I don't see a problem of Soros or anyone, because if those who are giving money are not making or trying to change the editorial policy, trying to make some pressure on media, I don't see a problem of those who are giving the money. The problem is if they are trying to change the editorial policy. And this we have today very often from the advertisers. Please. Yes, please.
And you should also be questioning a little bit yourself. Why is always the Jewish banker conspiracy, which is as old as Europe and the US is always being taught? For the media organization that I work in Albania, basically our biggest funder is Sweden, the Swedish development. We're never called Swedish spies, because that's not something that would reverberate from somebody being xenophobic or having certain anti-Semitic theories in his mind. So they're using people's let's say fascist ideas, and they're playing to them, and they're playing to people's xenophobia, they're playing to conspiracy theories. So unless we have facts that there is some world conspiracy trying to control media, pushing some liberal agenda across the world and to destroy our nice politicians from the right in the Balkans or in Central Europe, or Mr. Trump in the US, I mean, we have to trust in what Oliver said and what else we know until now.
So I have a question for Anna. You said that the previous president used to ignore you when you were writing your stories, and I understand the frustration. At the same time, if you keep writing stories, and if you mention that I was ignored by the president and his people in these questions, wouldn't that affect the public opinion, you think? And wouldn't he feel like responding after seeing the damage being done to the image on the public? Did you get any response after seeing that some damage was made to his image?
This new president, Petro Poroshenko, not very new, but after previous, he cares about his image. He cares about his reputation, because I think that, as you know, that Ukrainian economy has a crisis because of war, and Ukraine has to ask about money to international foundation. I mean, for development, Ukraine is country. And because I think that only because of it, our president cares about his image and about his reputation. And he tried to protect his reputation for sure. And he has a lot of people and a lot of advisors and PR people who help him with it. And it was, as I said, it was pretty big attack for journalists, and it was like they tried to destroy our reputation, my reputation, reputation of my colleagues, and it was absolutely stupid things. And some of my previous colleagues met with me and advised me, stop doing it, stop investigate president. We have a lot of another example of corruption, stop doing it, it's very dangerous, something. It was like friendly advices that just be careful or something. And I think it was part of this company, it was part of the strategy that we should feel wrong, and we should feel that it's dangerous to investigate president. He cares about image. Poroshenko cares about how he looks. I mean, how in front of world, in front of Ukrainians, and because of it, it was a lot of resources, a lot of things they spent for attacking journalists, and it appears every time when we or our colleagues, because this Panama Papers, it was big scandal. I mean, this word scandal, and they spent all sources they had for like trying to calm it. But if somebody from my colleagues starts to investigate something about president of his friends or his business partners, every time he or she is being attacked, and it happens every time. And it's just part of president's protection of his image. He wants to be good, he wants to be for the world, I think the first because of money, because it's only one way to save Ukrainian economy, it's get money from international foundation. For previous president it was not problem because he was pro-Russian and Russia helped a lot, and we had a lot of Ukraine had a lot of business connection with Russia. Now it's stopped, and it's a big problem with financial system in Ukraine.
Thanks a lot. Any question more from the audience? Okay, then we will continue. Somebody? No. We will continue with, okay, Zrinka first, and then I will ask a question.
No, I just wanted to add something about advertising that you mentioned. Yes, because this is the, as I told you, this is the biggest problem for the independent media, not just in Croatia, but everywhere else. If you're independent, attacking everybody, revealing truths about corruption, about big companies, about corporations, you don't get adverts. So this is the reason why you cannot survive on the market. But, well, it's really interesting that actually the main topic of Croatian media is not corruption anymore, it's ideology. So there is a great division about those who are trying to revise history and talk about our fascist state that we had during the Second World War as something that was actually good, and those who are trying to prove that Croatia was on the right side, on the anti-fascist side, at the end of the Second World War. So we are talking about ideology in the moment when Croatia is actually facing economic crisis and trying to get out of recession, which is really incredible. By the way, about advertising, there was a big company on which most of the media, not just in Croatia, and most of the companies, not just in Croatia, but also in the rest of the region, depended. This was Agrokor. And the guy had the monopoly over dozens and hundreds of companies in Croatia, Slovenia, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. He owes billions of euros to everybody. And the state just let him go for 2 decades. He's a product of so-called criminal privatization that happened in Croatia after the war that we had in the 90s. And he really controlled the media. So nobody wanted to be critical, although everybody knew the truth about the guy, because he was advertising. Even now, when he went bankrupt, when there is a danger that the whole Croatian economy would go down because of one company, media are still very careful. They still try to picture him as a good guy with a family who cares about every cow that he has on his farms, although he owes to the state, to the other companies, and to Sberbank, which is the most dangerous thing because it's Russian bank, billions of euros. So this is the way how Russian capital, Russian money will control the region through Croatian company and probably the media. So this is the story that we were trying to follow. Everybody knew about that, but before it happened, nobody believed that it would happen. And this is how media depended on it. Agrokor was actually controlling most of the media in the country.
Okay, thanks. Just a short note also about this advertising, how it works. Several years ago, editor-chief of a very strong media in one of these countries told me, like Oliver, 80% of the market in my country, in that country, he said, where he lives, is controlled by one marketing agency. This marketing agency collects advertising from different companies and so on, but 80% of the marketing of advertising is going over this one company. And of course, if the chief or owner of this company is good with some political groups, that it's a clear influence of these political groups over that marketing or advertising company then on the media. So politicians have not to do so much. Sometimes there's many players who are helping the politicians to stay in power. Just because we spoke about the situation in some of these countries, I will ask very short everyone, starting from Besar, Zrinka, and then to Anna, because in the neighborhood, you have a lot of press freedom violations. Could you maybe just say, Besar, for especially Kosovo, how is the situation? Zrinka, maybe you can speak a little for Serbia or Slovenia or Bosnia, and Anna, maybe for Belarus. Very short, how you see the press freedom and media situation in your neighborhood, please.
Well, I'd like to say something wider than Kosovo, so also for Macedonia and Serbia and Montenegro. The situation in the Balkans is not very different from country to country. Pretty much it's this power play that there is some independent journalists and there's the oligarch political party conglomerate media when there is a lot of reporters who basically self-censor themselves. I disagree actually with Oliver in terms of why do they end up self-censoring themselves. I mean, there is the way that the pressure works from the owners of the media, the politicians, they force them, these journalists, to basically to behave, or they're pushed out of the market, or they face other things. So you have all these media outlets that can work for the politicians' interests, who are trying to squeeze either out of the market through advertising or other means those few independent journalists that are left. Same things happened in Kosovo, same thing happened in Macedonia, which went to even a bigger crisis, and I think the country is scoring much worse in the region right now. We had the same situation in Serbia, when I can just mention, when the prime minister was elected president over the weekend, and Mr. Vujovic received 60% of the media coverage when there were like 6 other people running in the election. So you have this, let's say, alternative reality created through this oligarch or politician-controlled media, which is brainwashing the people and making them dubious about anything. I mean, just to go a little bit how crazy it is. When I was a young kid, when I started journalism, most of our colleagues, the politicians, didn't like, they would call them, attack them as former communist security spies. Then they realized they were just too young to be called security spies, because I was born in '83. Then they started calling us journalists controlled by the construction mafia, because, you know, construction oligarchs were a big thing. Now there are other conspiracies that will pop up. Politicians will use these huge megaphones they have. Public television, it's not public. These large TV stations, which are just like, in closest thing I would say in Albania or across the region would be like television station, commercial television stations like Berlusconi's are, and in Albania they're very similar. We even have Velines, if you believe it or not, or TV shows like which are very similar. And these platforms, when they are given almost universal access, no question asked, or this sort of reality when they're like supposedly ask tough questions, but they're agreed beforehand. So there is these few journalists that they are on the side or independent, which are attacked all the time. They try to ignore you. When they don't ignore you, they will have these other people who attack you. Basically, what they don't do, they don't react directly, because they have an army of surrogates. An army of surrogates who will go on TV, who will question your credentials, will question everything about you, but just not your story, because that's the only thing they don't want to be talked about. That's the exact thing I think happened with the Panama Papers in the Ukraine, and it's the same formula used across the region. These people are not reinventing the wheel. They are copycatting each other across and across and across. So they have created this thing, and they, you know, sometimes to attack a journalist in Albania, they will pick something that Gruevski said in Macedonia about these conspiracy theories. And they will use even each other's propaganda, basically. And this is something that is new. I mean, it happened in the last few years, and it's something I guess we should all fight against, because I think it just doesn't threaten only the future of journalism, but the future of democracy in our countries.
Thanks. Zrinka?
Well, Anna first.
Okay, Anna, please.
So about Belarus, I was there 3 months ago. I talked about Panama Papers in Ukraine, and I was really very sorry about their investigative journalism. It's almost impossible to do investigative journalism and high-quality journalism there, because it's like not a lot of people, not a lot of journalists who brave enough for asking authority about smuggling, about corruption. For example, now Belarus is big market of smuggling because of sanction against Russia. And because of impossible business between Ukraine and Russia, and we know a lot of examples when something produced in Ukraine, but it marked but produced in Belarus, and it is going to Russian market, and from opposite side. And I wanted to find somebody who can help me in Belarus discover this, work with the smuggling market, and it was absolutely impossible because people should ask authority about some things, about some fake companies, about something, and how they explained me, journalists who work there. It's young journalists who mostly work in some cultural things and some social things, not corruption, not business. They told me that if you try to do some serious journalism, it's not pressure to some journalists. It's just Belarusian authorities, they just do very simple things. They just close newspaper, and it doesn't work anymore. It's not against one personal journalist. It's about all newspaper. They find some things why this media can't work anymore. Some things in law or somewhere. And it's a problem because nobody wants to do something against his media. So now it's pretty bad. I mean, investigative journalism, serious journalism. But I think that anyway, I tried to tell them about this Panama Papers, how we work these things, how we worked with discovering corruption or something, and we hope that anyway, we will cooperate with them. We understand that it's very dangerous. It's not like in Ukraine. When I back from Belarus, I was very happy that I live in Ukraine, and it's a very democratic country.
Thanks. Zrinka?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we are facing now the second generation of media owners, so they're not big corporations from some other European countries. But, for example, we have a media owner who's a very rich guy from Croatia, who's a lawyer and who just wants to have influence and power. It's incredible how all the parties, all the ruling parties, when they come in power, always use the services from the same media. So there are interest groups. And I think it's the model that works everywhere else. I can only talk a little bit about Serbia because I've been there, I saw the papers, I saw televisions. What I know is absolutely that Prime Minister and now President Vujovic is controlling absolutely everything. And what we could see is that not only that he was controlling televisions, where they were broadcasting his press conferences, which last for hours and nobody cares. You know, this time does not have a price. But I know that his advert was on the front pages of all the papers in Serbia just the day before the elections. He bought all the front pages of all the papers. So this model actually does not work that way in Croatia, but it works in other ways that, of course, they have their favorite papers, and they also, the politicians who call themselves to be moderate, abuse those media which are controlled by radical right interest groups because they're populists. They know that their European partners wouldn't like it, but before the elections, like the president, they actually give interviews to those media which should be closed because of the fascism and hate speech that they're spreading. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think that what we are seeing is lining with national. As in political life, it's the same with the media. There are national political parties, although Bosnia and Herzegovina is supposed to be a country which has three constitutional nations, Croats, Bosnians, and Serbs. But as the political parties are always lining with those national groups, you don't have one party representing all the national groups, but you always have national parties. It's the same with the media. I think that all of them, Serbs, Croats, and Bosnians, control their own media. There is not one joint, probably Bosnian, so-called public television, and they're trying to destroy it, representing the whole nation. And this growing nationalism is very dangerous, and I think that Europe should worry a lot about what's going on.
Thanks a lot. What I can say at the end is only I'm still missing that journalists are not enough strong in doing the work, because the politicians will always, it's not just a thing that happens in this part of Europe, trying to be in power, misuse media, and so on. I'm saying the job of the politician is to misuse media and to try to stay in power, and the job of the journalist is to stop them in that. And that is what very often the journalists, maybe also because we have a lot of young, not educated enough journalists who are easily becoming under influence of the politicians. Sometimes I'm missing, say, these journalists who are not enough using this power. It's hard, but still I think journalists could or should do more the work, maybe more solidarity between journalists we need also in the SEEMO region. I would like to thank everyone sitting here, Anna, Zrinka, Besar, and especially also Barbara, coming from the Central European Initiative, because with the money of the SEI, we are supporting journalists with this award, investigate journalists now for years. So thank you a lot of Barbara for that. I like also to thank you, everyone sitting here, and of course, also those who are responsible for everything that is happening here. It means those who are not most here sitting now, the bosses of this journalism festival, because I think it's really a great project, and I think we should thank everyone now to the journalism festival here for the work. And also to those volunteers who are sitting here and who are doing the great job. So thank you a lot, and I hope to see you next year. Thanks.
No yet. Okay.
We did it from here, so I...
Okay, because I would like my editor-in-chief. Yes, yes.